This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to retaliate after Iran fired at least 180 ballistic missiles at Israel in response to repeated Israeli attacks on Lebanon and the assassination of several Hezbollah leaders, including Hassan Nasrallah. Video posted online shows some of the missiles striking at or near the Nevatim air base, which houses Israel's U.S.-made F-35 fighter jets. Israel says the only death from the attacks was a Palestinian man who was killed by falling debris in the occupied West Bank in Jericho. At the White House, President Biden responded by saying the United States will help Israel, quote, exact severe consequences, unquote. On Tuesday, a Pentagon spokesperson said U.S. forces had aided Israel in thwarting Iran's attack.
During the attack, the U.S. military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. U.S. Navy destroyers deployed to the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles.
In Tel Aviv, Israeli police said at least 7 people died in a shooting and stabbing attack on Tuesday. Israeli authorities claim the attack was carried out by 2 people from the occupied West Bank. One was shot dead, the other seriously wounded. In Lebanon, Hezbollah says its fighters have repelled incursions by Israeli forces attempting to invade southern Lebanon. Israeli media reports at least 2 Israeli soldiers were killed, 18 others wounded near the Lebanese border town of Odessa. Meanwhile, Israel's military ordered more residents of Beirut's southern suburbs to evacuate their homes. The UN says more than 1 million people across Lebanon have been uprooted by Israel's assault. In the Gaza Strip, Palestinian health officials say Israeli attacks have killed more than 79 Palestinians, wounding 82 others over the past 24 hours. In one strike, Israeli fighter jets bombed a school-turned-shelter in Gaza City's Tufah neighborhood, killing at least 13 people, including children. Israeli forces also bombed the Al-Amal orphanage west of Gaza City, killing 6 Palestinians and wounding many others. Here in New York, vice presidential nominees Tim Walz and J.D. Vance faced off in their first and only debate ahead of November's election. The two clashed when Walz questioned Vance about Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen.
Still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Senator Vance took aim at Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris's record on border security, while Walz condemned Donald Trump over abortion rights. Their sparring over abortion came as a new law took effect in Louisiana that reclassifies the abortion medications mifepristone and misoprostol, listing them as controlled dangerous substances. The first of its kind law in the country makes it a crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison to possess the medications without a prescription. In Ukraine, authorities have declared a day of mourning in the southern city of Kherson, where a Russian attack on a market killed 6 people and wounded more than 10 others. Elsewhere, at least 1 person was killed and 32 injured when Russia bombed residential buildings and infrastructure in the southern Zaporizhzhia region. In eastern Ukraine, Russian forces have taken control of the city of Vuhledar, along with 2 more frontline villages. Meanwhile, Ukraine's top prosecutor says he's investigating the murder of 16 Ukrainian prisoners of war, alleging they were summarily executed after they were surrendered to Russian forces on the Eastern Front. In Brussels, Belgium, the former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte was sworn in as Secretary General of NATO Tuesday. In his inaugural speech, he pledged to shore up Western support of Ukraine and warned China over its growing ties with Russia.
Through its support for Russia's military industry, China has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war in Ukraine. China cannot continue to fuel the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War without this impacting its interests and reputation.
The White House has approved an additional $567 million in U.S. military aid to Taiwan, the largest such aid package ever. Its approval came as Chinese authorities led celebrations marking the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Chinese leader Xi Jinping spoke from Beijing.
Taiwan is a sacred territory of China, and the people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are connected by blood, which is thicker than water.
President Xi warned against separatist activities, as he put it, in Taiwan, and said its reunification with China is inevitable. Claudia Sheinbaum was sworn in as Mexico's first female president Tuesday, pledging her 6-year term will be a time for transformation. Sheinbaum has vowed to strengthen women's rights in Mexico, which has one of the highest rates of femicide, to expand access to public health care and education and other social reforms that have been bolstered by the ruling Morena Party. Sheinbaum received the baton of power from Indigenous and Afro-Mexican women who joined her on stage as she addressed thousands of supporters gathered in Mexico City's Zocalo Square.
I am certain that power is honesty and humility, that our thinking is Mexican humanism, that our nation and people are great. And I am certain we are the only option that represents well-being and progress with justice.
Here in the United States, the death toll from Hurricane Helene has surpassed 166 people across 6 states, with hundreds still missing, more than 5 days after the storm triggered devastating floods and landslides. Massive power outages continue to impact over 1.3 million customers. In eastern Tennessee, at least 6 plastic factory workers are missing and presumed dead after floodwaters swelled around their workplace, trapping the group of predominantly Latinx workers who for hours clung to the back of a semi-truck before they were swept away by the deluge. Some family members report the employer, Impact Plastics, told the workers not to evacuate and threatened to fire anyone who left ahead of the storm. This is Robert Jarvis, one of the survivors.
What would you say to the company?
Why'd you make us work that day? Why? We shouldn't have worked. We shouldn't have been there. None of us should have been there. And that's what I should say to them.
Hurricane Helene has become the second deadliest hurricane after Katrina. The state of Texas has put another prisoner to death. On Tuesday, 61-year-old Garcia Glenn White was strapped to a gurney in the state penitentiary in Huntsville and injected with a single lethal dose of the drug pentobarbital. It was the 6th execution carried out in the United States in the last 11 days. An investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice has found violence and sexual assault are rife in prisons across Georgia, constituting cruel and unusual punishment for the state's estimated 50,000 incarcerated people. The scathing report by the DOJ's Civil Rights Division found Georgia fails to protect people in custody from extreme violence inside 34 state prisons, as well as 4 prisons run by for-profit corporate contractors. It also found an unconstitutional risk of harm from sexual violence at these prisons, including widespread sexual assaults of LGBTQ+ people. Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark leads the Justice Department Civil Rights Division.
In America, time in prison should not be a sentence to death, torture, or rape. We can't turn a blind eye to the wretched conditions and wanton violence unfolding in these institutions. The people incarcerated in these jails and prisons are our neighbors, siblings, children, parents, family members, and friends.
And the Justice Department has announced a federal investigation in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre after Oklahoma's Supreme Court in June dismissed a lawsuit brought by 2 elderly survivors. No one's ever been charged over the murders of an estimated 300 black people who were killed when a white mob burned down what was known as Black Wall Street, the thriving African-American neighborhood of Greenwood. The Justice Department will probe the killings under the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act, which gives the federal government the power to reopen civil rights-related cold cases. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.